of the Louvre. They were slightly hesitant to kill people in the actual royal apartments, so we imagine that they dragged a lot of people out here in order to kill them. There's another story that people tell, where the king at the time, Charles IX, sat in a balcony window with a crossbow, firing down upon Huguenots who were trying to escape on the River Seine.
There was a survivor of this terrible day in the Louvre, a Huguenot prince of the blood, Henri of Navarre. Days before the massacre, Henri had married the sister of Charles IX, Marguerite de Valois. 20 years later, the couple were King and Queen of France. The last Valois king had died childless, and Henri, next in line to the throne, became the first ruler of a new dynasty, the Bourbons. But to become Henri IV for all of France, and crowned as such in Paris, a deal needed to be struck. Henri would have to convert to Catholicism. He passed through here, the Rue Saint-Honoré, which is just opposite the Louvre, heading for Notre Dame to hear Mass. And this was on the 22nd of March, 1594. He did this because, as we know, to give France peace and unity, it was worth a Mass. Paris vaut bien une messe. A statue of Henri IV is on the Pont Neuf, which was itself completed in his reign to connect the right and left banks of the Seine. But the king was also determined to make his mark on the royal palace nearby. Henri wanted to link the Louvre to the recently built Palace of the Tuileries nearby. So to connect the two palaces, he ordered this built, the Grande Galerie. A name was now given to this grandiose vision of expansion, the Grand Dessein, the Great Plan. As you can see, it's all conceived on the grandest scale. It's half a mile from there to there, for example. And the idea was that this is a place of entertainment and magnificent spectacle. You could come here, for example, to watch the water pageants on the Seine. But it's also a mystical space, a sacred space. It's where Henri IV and the Bourbon kings who came after him literally believed that they had the divine touch. They believed, most importantly, that they could cure people of the disease of scrofula, which is a really nasty kind of tuberculosis of the neck. What would happen is that the king would receive people and say, the king touches you, God cures you. Either way, I hope it worked. Now there is a clue to Henri's life and loves in the Louvre. It's a painting that's not in one of the main galleries, where thousands gather to look at the usual suspects. But if you find this mysterious and striking work of art, you won't be disappointed. This is Gabrielle d'Estrées and her sister. Gabrielle d'Estrées was the mistress of Henri IV, and as they say, every picture tells a story. Have a look at the gestures. Gabrielle's sister is holding her nipple between thumb and finger, to indicate that she's pregnant with the king's son, the future Duc de Vendôme. And Gabrielle's also holding a bejewelled band of gold. It's not worn on her finger to symbolise a marriage, but it's thought to be the king's coronation ring, a token of his love and his loyalty. The two women are sitting in a bath, perhaps filled with milk or wine, as was the aristocratic custom. Both are beautifully made up to show off their white alabaster faces. Women of the time actually would crush up the innards of swallows and mix them with lilies, ground pearls and camphor, then smear the paste on their faces to get this ghostly look. This didn't seem to dampen the ardour of Henri, who couldn't resist Gabrielle. She bore him 3 other children before her sudden death in 1599. Henri's own life also came to an abrupt end, on the streets of Paris on the 14th of May 1610. One of his greatest achievements was to have guaranteed the religious liberties of Protestant Huguenots. But for such tolerance, he would never be forgiven by those who saw themselves as holy warriors for the true faith of Rome. The fun-loving Henry came to a gory and violent end. That was here on the Rue de la Ferronnerie. This was where a religious fanatic called François Ravillac pulled back the blinds of the carriage that the king was travelling in and plunged a long knife 3 times deep into his chest. The assassination of Henri left uncertainty over who would now rule France. Here's the story in paint of the woman who did. Here in the Louvre are 24 canvases devoted to the life of Marie de Medici, Henri's second wife. As regent, the Queen had many enemies. She needed to legitimise her grip on power. So she turned to the weapon of art and the greatest painter of the day, Peter Paul Rubens. I talked to curator Blaise Ducot about the biggest painting here, showing the Queen's coronation.
Here, the first big impression is one of a great movement over towards the main focus of the painting, which is, of course, Marie de Medici in the process of being crowned in the Saint-Denis Basilica, the day before the assassination of Henri IV. You can even see him in the background, but very much recognizable, watching the Queen, and in the process giving her the sense of legitimacy that without she wouldn't have been able to govern and rule as regent.
This is painting on the grandest of scales. This is the art of the Baroque, with its extravagant use of movements and colour, and its feeling of sensuality. And all of this simply leaps out here.
It's a piece of theatre in many senses, and you have to look at it that way. They're very theatrical paintings, very Baroque. And of course, Rubens was the great Baroque painter.
And it was the sheer monumentality of the Baroque that fired the imagination of the next ruler of France to mould the Louvre in his own image. This is the famous portrait of Louis XIV by Hyacinthe Rigaud. He was the Sun King, the l'état c'est moi champion of bling. He was the Bourbon who brought new levels of pomp and grandeur to the Louvre. But to my mind, there's something over the top, even desperately camp about this painting. Have a look at the big hair, the shoes, the clothes, the rich, rich colours. All of it seems to be screaming luxury and power. But after all, that's what it was all about. During the early years of Louis's reign, the Louvre echoed to the sounds of thousands of labourers, masons and joiners working to create new facades, stuccos, elaborate carved ceilings and wood panelling. Work started on an opposing facade on the outside of the Queue Carrée. This colonnade would look out, and Parisians would look up to the palace with due deference and awe. Here, in the Queue Carrée, Louis completed the building work begun by his father. He quadrupled the size of this courtyard to the dimensions you see today, and with one express aim, to make the Louvre a bigger and more imposing place. And inside, a royal waiting room was built, the Rotonde d'Apollon, to wow impressionable visitors to the royal palace. Just off the Rotonde, a spectacular gallery was built, the Galerie d'Apollon, designed by the king's architect, Louis Le Vau. And I'm looking around because everything here has got a kind of mythical or allegorical meaning, and all of that is literally revolving around the king himself. And just look at this place. It's splendid, it's glittering with all this gold glory. It really is, you know, the personification of what it means to be the Sun King.
Every image here reinforces the assertion that the king was godlike, the centre of the universe, looking down from high on a country where he and he alone had absolute power, with a rule over France that could never ever be questioned by mere mortals. Unlike his illustrious predecessor Francois, Louis was not only a builder, but someone with a huge appetite for collecting art. The Charles Saatchi, if you like, of the 17th century. During his reign, the size of the royal collection expanded from 150 to exactly 2,376 paintings. He bought the best French art of his time, 32 Poussin, 11 Claude, 26 Lebrun, and 17 Mignard. And foreign masterpieces like this lovely but sombre painting, The Death of the Virgin, by Caravaggio. All now hang here in what was his Louvre.
The Louvre was a luxurious plaything for Louis XIV, but there was one big problem. It was in Paris, and he hated Paris. But funnily enough, the Parisians also hated him. So what happened in 1670 was that Louis XIV left Paris for Versailles in a great big splendid royal huff, and he hardly ever set foot in the place again. But he didn't leave empty-handed. He took all of his artworks with him.
With the exit of Louis XIV to Versailles, the Grand Dessin was put on hold. Much of the building work remained unfinished. The colonnade was left without a roof. Throughout the 18th century, the Louvre had a much more ramshackle feel to it, and it echoed to a more plebeian cacophony of sounds and voices.
The Grande Galerie changed from being the preserve of royals and aristocrats and became instead the centre for artistic hustling in Paris. This is where you'd find engravers hard at work, furniture makers, makers of the very finest hats. It was a place of great energy, bustle and commerce. But the most important thing that happened here was that by royal warrant, artists were allowed to come and live here, and they copied paintings. And then they made their own art. And this was the moment when the Louvre properly became a centre for cultural exchange in the endless carnival of Parisian life.
As the palace began to open its doors to vulgar outsiders, the presence of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture in the King's former apartments still preserved a sense of decorum and gravitas in the Louvre. First in the Grande Galerie, then here in the Salle Carrée, the Academy held an annual, then biennial exhibition. Starting on St. Louis' Day, 25th of August, the salon was open to the public. The idea of showing art to all who wished to come was novel and proved fantastically popular. Events at the salon was something to be argued about in another institution, forever dear to all Parisians.
This was the first ever coffee house in Paris, opening to customers in 1686. From the word go, the Café Procope attracted intellectuals. In the 18th century, the great philosophe of the Enlightenment came here. And amongst them was someone very important to our story. Behind me here, this is Denis Diderot. Now, Diderot wrote penetrating critiques of the salon, and in doing so, he effectively invented art criticism.
And he threw down a challenge to artists with an ambition to impress him at the salon.
First of all, move me, surprise me, rend my heart, make me tremble, weep, shudder, outrage me, and delight my eyes afterwards, if you can.